Hey, how's it going? It's Stephen here from understandingaudio.com, and this is part 3 of a 3-part video series on how to develop and perfect your mixing method. In video 1, I spoke about 3 things great mixers always do so that you can start fast tracking your progress and get to perfecting your mixing method a lot quicker. In video 2, I went in depth on the mid-range and mid-range EQ, why we use EQ, and how invaluable sorting out the mid-range is when it comes to having great mixes and a great mixing method. And in this video, you're going to find out the truth about learning how to mix. How long it takes, what's involved, and what you need to do. This video is not about the gear you need to buy. This is about teaching you skills that will last forever. It's about figuring out the how, what, and most importantly, the why of mixing and why you need to have a mixing method. And what better way for you to find out the truth about learning how to mix than from your fellow subscribers. Now, a few months ago, I reached out to my subscribers over at understandingaudio.com to ask them a few questions and see if they wanted to share some of their audio journey with me and with you. I got a great response and I interviewed a few of them to hear about their story, how the site has helped them, and how they've developed their method. They've been gracious enough to let me share that with you today. So the first person in the first interview I want to share with you is with Taylor Battori. Taylor's got a great story, and he got inspired by the School of Rock movie when he was a kid to start playing guitar. His parents got him a guitar for Christmas, and he eventually went on to study at Berklee College of Music. He then studied a music degree at Wayne State, and as a jazz guitarist, he made the natural progression into wanting to record his own music. The jazz didn't last too long, and he quickly became a prog rock virtuoso, and also started working in post-production studios. Inevitably, he became interested in recording and production through making his own album, but he realized he had to put his own workflow and method together. Now, in the first video in this series, I opened by saying that the average time it takes someone to figure out how to mix is 2 years. And here's what Taylor has to say about that and how he did it, how having a method now frees him up to be a lot more creative, and what he's learned from me. Take it away, Taylor.
I've always heard from a lot of different people, because like when I worked at the post-production studio, they would tell me the same stuff, because some of those guys work on music too, but it's just like read everything that you can read and just, learn from a lot of other people who are already doing that sort of work. So I kind of took it upon myself. I got a book called Making Sound. Again, I can't remember the author's name, but Making Sound was one that I had read from the front to the back. And then again, once I kind of started like getting into the pre-production stages of my album, I just took the deep dive and went on to, the internet and just found resources such as yourself and Pensado's Place and all these different people who are all contributing to like the communal knowledge of recording and mixing. And I pretty much just would, listen to and read a lot of different articles and things like that. And I would just take notes on all of those articles and videos. And I would pretty much have like this compendium of notes of things and tips that I think would be useful in some context here or there. And, a lot of the emails that I get from you and then some of the other places, I kept all of them and would systematically kind of go through and just like take notes on which ones I liked and which ones I think would be useful. And then the more and more I did that, the more and more it kind of just started to get instilled in my brain a little bit. I just remembered, oh yeah, that's a cool thing that I can try. Yep. And, that well is pretty much endless. Like there's probably still hundreds of techniques that I learned about that I still have never used,
Oh yeah, but you took all this information and you built your own method. You built your workflow from all of this information that's out there. But what I'm trying, because I've been through the same process. How many hours or days, or can you put a number on it? How much time you spend actually doing this? Is this, is that even quantifiable?
Quantifiable would be tricky to put a number to, but I guess to kind of put it into perspective is I started recording my first full-length album in late August, early September of 2016, and I was kind of using that as a means of kind of as a means of testing out my workflow and trying to figure out how that all happened and how I can make it work for every single song, Yeah. And just to put it into perspective, I started probably early September, and I didn't stop, like it wasn't finished and out until like the end of September 2018. So it pretty much took me about 2 years to really get that idea of how it all works down,
Do you think that having this system and having this method, do you think it frees you up to be even more creative as you go through things?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because of the fact that you don't have to think about that process as much once you kind of get it innately stored in your brain. There's been plenty of times where I offer up things to my clients, just like random ideas here and there, and I don't really in the moment 100% think about how I'm going to achieve that sound because, or like whatever it is, because I know it'll come later.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about this random vocal take that I wanted them to do, like something that's different, that's not going to be, used 100% dry or whatever in the song. And I'm like, you just wait and see what I do with it. Maybe I'll do some reverb send or a delay or something fancy with it,
Yeah.
and then it ends up working out really nicely. So it's like, because of the fact that I'm not worrying about how to do all the real, the mix I know will come eventually,
Yeah.
And when I don't have to worry about that as much, like, oh, how am I going to get this to sit in the mix and blah, blah, blah. It's like, you kind of free up yourself to kind of be able to imagine like all these different, timbres that can potentially find their way into the recording.
So you've got that idea mapped out in your head of this is what I'm going to tackle first. This is my system. This is my method. This is what I do first, and then I move through all the rest. And you don't stray from that system. You get creative as you move along, but that's your sort of roadmap.
Yeah. And then once I get to the mixing stage, it'll be the same thing that I always do. Like, I usually start off with a static mix, which is just no plugins and then just faders and panning. And that's it. And then like kind of like I go down the list and do like one thing at a time. So then like EQ, then compression or whatever, and then once you kind of get that starting to roll, then it's simple to kind of be able to apply that to every single mix that you do. And of course, again, it varies dependent upon what it might call for. There might be a certain moment in the song where you got to have like a special reverb trick or whatever. But
Yeah.
that all comes once you get like the basic elements of the track where they need to be.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's why I take such a systematic approach. And that's why, all my information is based around that. Even my guide that you have, the one hack, you'd mentioned that sort of helped you with referencing and building out your workflow and your system a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I know a few of my other articles, on balance helped you out too. Could you mention a little bit about that? Could you talk a little bit about how that helped you?
Yeah. So a couple of the articles that I read from you were just like really simple concepts to understand. And it's something that like just adds up to so much when you really factor them all in together. So the free guide you'd mentioned was the how to use reference masters, and I remember being in that boat of like, I've always heard people say, use a reference master so that way you know what you want your sound to sound like. And I remember throwing it into my project, and I'm like, this is not how it's supposed to sound. Like all this other mastered track is so much louder and so much fuller than my puny mix next to it, And the proper thing is just like, I didn't know, like, oh, you have to make sure that they're level matched because otherwise you're not going to get the proper information from it, And it's something as simple as that, I'm not the best at using reference masters, but it's a crucial concept to understand, just to be able to, if you're going to reference something, to make sure that it's level matched to what you're mixing. And then, the other one was, the balance one, and that's kind of just like the basic principle of like the idea of a static mix, where it's like you're obviously trying to find balance throughout your whole mix, so that way you can hear everything evenly or clearly. And like kind of to get like that launching point is rather than starting to throw in plugins on every single thing and do this and this and this, you have to make sure that you understand where everything's sitting first. So I think just that idea of striving and focusing on balance in your mix without plugins, and like I think you mentioned it in the article, was just faders and just panning. That's it. Like drop everything down to zero and then bring them all up individually, and like just try to like get like something that works for a decent portion of the song. And then that at least gives you a starting point to like, okay, this needs to be EQ, this needs compression, and then so on and so forth. You do all the rest of your plugins on top of that.
Amazing stuff from Taylor. Now, before I go on, here are Taylor's details if you want to get in contact with him. He's TB Audio MI on most of the social platforms. So you can see that he's a smart, university-educated guy who still had to spend 2 years trawling the internet and diligently applying everything he learned to learn how to mix. He developed a mixing method that serves him and his clients in a similar way to how I went about doing things. Trial and error, with lots of failure and constant repetition, and you know what, that method works. But I think that Taylor and I both agree that it's not the most efficient way of doing things. The great thing for him is that a lot of the hard work is behind Taylor now, and he uses that method religiously and is constantly adding to it and aiming to perfect it over time, which is all we can do, but it is what we should be doing. There's no point in being aimless with our mixing. Next up, you're going to hear from Robin. Robin's a composer who's had placements with playlist management companies, and he's about to make an even bigger wave in the film, TV, and game audio world. He's one half of the composition duo Wallace and Jermaine, and he's going to share with you how I've helped him, how he's adapted my teaching into his own method, and how he views having a mixing method as something that helps him serve the music. Which, as you know, is something I believe in so strongly, and I agree with him 100%. So here's what Robin has to say.
You methodically explain things. So to a programmer's brain and to a composer's brain, that's a wonderful thing. There was one particular video that I latched onto with you, and it was you just using the stock plugin. I think it was called Expander. This is all from memory, and it was basically building synths from the ground up and layering them. And as a guitarist, I knew how to achieve good tone, good sound through equipment that I was familiar with. But synths were a mystery to me, sound-wise, a real mystery. So I was very interested in that because I thought, well, I'm going to get clients. There's going to be synth sounds in there. I better learn how to tackle them. The reason I've sort of answered your email, would I like to be on this, is because your two videos on synth sounds, one was the original one that I mentioned, and another one was getting wide synth sounds, coupled with a really good video you did. It was a French song, and you gave it a rock stadium feel with really clever use of reverb. I latched onto that. I really liked the outcome of that. So I took these techniques and I changed them and refined them, which I think you should do to your own needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I put them into that first piece on the synth. You've heard it.
I have.
And you reckon it's Ripper, so it's got to be there. Well, that's where your teaching on synths led me.
Great.
And I'm really stoked with what I came out with.
So you should be. Definitely.
Logistically, I approach every mix the same, but I mix to serve the piece.
Yep.
Not to serve the method. So, I mean, my layout is always the same. You know, my kicks and any sampled kicks are always hard left, and I work a way up to basically from the ground of the mix up, and I work to the top layer if it's vocals or if it's whatever is the melodic instrument or instruments, they're always over there. So everything's color-coded the same every time. Everything's laid out the same every time. I got into a habit of finding a channel strip setting that worked. So I would have a really nice sound, and I would think that's a really nice kick drum sound. I really like that for a kick-in sound. I'll create a channel strip called kick-in, and that's the mix of plugins. That's the chain, and I'll save it. And you know what, Stephen? I might go and use it on the next mix, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Right, and I because no one's pressuring me to say, have you finished that song yet? Have you finished that mix yet? I can actually say, well, I don't like that method. It doesn't work for me. I don't like formula conveyor belt mixing. I'm happy with the layout and the color coding, but I am going to build my channel strips as I see fit for that particular situation. So I have a method of mixing, but I don't drag and drop sounds.
Yep. You've discovered kind of what I did as well, that you can't apply absolutely everything from one mix to another, because it's a different song, There's different instrumentation, been recorded in a different way, or your samples sit in a different way in the mix. And if you just say, okay, this is how I compress my bass, this is how I treat my bass, and you try and use that every single time, it's not going to work. But if you do what you spoke about, where you say, I know how I want the bass to sound, and if I can apply that to serve the song each time based on my workflow and my method, I'll get great results.
Yes.
And I definitely agree with that.
Your video, your synths video, and your both of them, and your reverb video, I did not take what you showed me and explained, and I did not rotely reproduce it.
No, that's not the... Yeah, exactly. It's not the point.
Right. What I did is I took it as a starting point for the sound and the technique I wanted to develop. So when I learned what you showed me, my quest was not over. I took it and I made it mine, not yours. Yes. And that's how the art evolves.
That last point is everything to me. He's taken what someone has shown him and taught him, made it his own, and added it to his own method. Much respect to Robin for taking this approach and having such an incredible outlook on music. If you want to know more about Robin, check out his composer portfolio, Wallace and Germain. There's a link in the description down below. Now, as I'm sure you can see, Robin's a very inspiring, positive guy with lots of incredible things to say and lots of great music for you to hear. So you should get in contact with him about his music and maybe even collaborate with him. Both Robin and Taylor have spoken about the trial and error approach that arises when you're trying to develop a mixing method. Now, my aim is to give you that starting point Robin was talking about, but I also want to give you so much more than that. I don't feel that anyone should have to spend 2 years learning how to mix, not even close to it. I don't feel you need to go to university to learn how to mix either. I spent 4 years in university, and while it was a great experience, I've learned so much more by being in the real world and learning how to do things myself. Now, that's not knocking a university education. It is incredibly valuable, and I learned a lot of great things in university. But real world experience and being in studios, going through all this failure and disappointment and coming out the other end is what really made me confident in my mixing and confident in my abilities. And there was a huge amount of trial and error in that. I spent years working in studios on video game, advertising, corporate, animation, and of course music projects to figure all this out. I've gone through all the years of confusion, disappointment, trial and error, and sheer hard work to develop my mixing method. I just don't want you to have to do the same thing. Now, whether you're new to mixing or you've been mixing for years, I'm going to show you how to put together a method that will transform your mixing style. Over the past few years, I'm lucky to have helped thousands of people improve their mixing skills and get incredible results. Now, I want you to perfect your mixing method without any of the hardship. And I'm very happy to say that my brand new course is the clear, reliable path to consistent results, creative freedom, and building great mixes. Everything I've learned about mixing workflows, EQ, compression, distortion, delay, reverb, modulation, and much more is included in this course. I'm going to share more about this next week, but to be fair to all of my subscribers over at understandingaudio.com, this is initially only going to be launched through my mailing list. So if you want to pick up this course, and I highly recommend you do, then you need to be subscribed. And to subscribe costs you absolutely nothing. And for added extra value to what's already free, I even give away my book, The One Hack That Guarantees a Unique, pro-sounding mix when you sign up. All you have to do is go over to getpromixes.com and download the guide. You'll then be part of the mailing list and the community at understandingaudio.com, and you'll be the first to hear about my course when it arrives next week. If you're already subscribed, then thank you so much for being a loyal part of this community, and I can't wait for you to get this course. Keep an eye out for an email from me on Monday. I'm so excited to share this with you. Again, you'll hear from me in an email on Monday, and in the meantime, keep having fun making great music.